Welcome to this Candidates Night that's being co-sponsored by the Town Meeting Members Association, the League of Women Voters of Brookline, and the Brookline Neighborhood Alliance. I'm Charlene Jones. I'm the co-chair of the Brookline Neighborhood Alliance, the BNA, and I'm going to say a few words about tonight's format before I turn it over to Margaret Bush of the League of Women Voters, who will be our moderator for the evening. This event will feature candidates for Brookline Housing Authority, Library Trustee, Selectman, and School Committee. We have a lot of candidates tonight, and we're going to have to do our best to stick to the schedule. The agenda that has been circulated lists the time for each of the groups of candidates to speak and some of the procedures. Basically, for the contested race for the selectmen, there will be a 2-minute opening statement, then questions, and a 2-minute closing statement. Similar opening and closing statements for the school committee as well. There's one important element of the procedure for those two sets of candidates that I'd like to explain. In keeping with a procedure that the League of Women Voters has followed very successfully, we will have questions submitted on cards and then read by the moderator so that the candidates can answer. There are two sets of cards. Green cards are for the selectmen, and white cards are for the school committee. If you want to be absolutely sure that your question is addressed to the right set of candidates, you can write for the school committee or the selectmen so that there is no confusion at all. Carla Benka and Harry Friedman have these cards, and Jean Stringham, and are distributing them. There will be some time while we hear from the candidates for Brookline Housing Authority and for Library Trustee to write questions, and Harry, Carla, and Jean will collect them during the course of the evening, and the moderator will then read the questions. When you write down your question, please bear in mind that it should be directed to all of the candidates in that particular category. It shouldn't be a particular question to an individual candidate, such as, why did you vote against Article 17 at the 2009 town meeting? Those questions will not be used. They have to be directed to all four candidates, and they will be answered by all four candidates. And we will rotate the order of the answers so that the same candidate doesn't answer first every time as we go through all of the questions that are submitted. I hope that's clear. It's a slightly unusual procedure, but we do have people to collect those cards, and we'll continue to distribute and collect them throughout the course of this candidates night. I'd like to say a few words of thanks to many people who have volunteered to help, both in terms of publicizing this event and organizing it. Members of the BNA board, including Carla and Jean, obviously helped. Lee Cook-Childs not only provided refreshments, but will be serving as timekeeper this evening. Co-chair Daniel Saltzman ensured that everything was working in this room, that the microphones were on, and made the placards with the names of all of the candidates. Joanna Baker volunteered to help us. She's a town meeting member, publicize this event and to get the word out. Harry Friedman from the Town Meeting Members Association, who's here helping to distribute cards, also made sure that the word was circulated by email, and so did John Bassett. And we thank all of them and anyone else I'm forgetting who's helped to make this possible. I'd like to thank in particular the person I'm going to introduce now, Margaret Bush of the League of Women Voters of Brookline, who will serve as a moderator for this event, as she has had at similar events in previous years. We're very glad that despite a broken wrist, she's been able to join us tonight to participate. So, Margaret, I'll turn it over to you now, and thank you.
Thank you, and welcome to the audience on behalf of the League of Women Voters. To remind you, the League of Women Voters is a membership organization of men and women which has been founded to promote political responsibility through informed and active participation. And many of you in the audience are members of the League of Women Voters. If you aren't, please consider joining us. Thank you for being with us this evening, and we're pleased to start with a single candidate for the office of Brookline, for the Brookline Housing Authority. And we're giving Joanne Sullivan a few minutes to tell us about current concerns that she and the Brookline Housing Authority are dealing with. Thank you, Joanne.
Thanks, Margaret. As noted, my name is Joanne Sullivan, and I am currently a commissioner on the Brookline Housing Authority. I am running for re-election to a second term. I am a former town meeting member from Precinct 3 in Brookline. I served 2 terms. I am a Brookline homeowner, and I have been since 1997. And during the day, I work at the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston in the Prudential Center. The Brookline Housing Authority, for those of you who don't know, has really 4 pieces that I like to focus on that it's responsible for: maintaining, preserving, and increasing the supply of affordable housing for eligible seniors, eligible families, and eligible persons with disabilities in Brookline, and we're focusing on safe, decent, and affordable housing. We will also focus on developing service components for our residents, advocating for sufficient resources on the local, the state, and the federal levels for affordable housing. And we also want to support development in our Brookline communities that strengthens and also fits into those communities and our neighborhoods. I can focus on the total number of units that we are responsible for with our $16.8 million budget. We have over 1,500 units of housing. That includes housing, and it also includes Section 8 vouchers. Some highlights from Brookline: because we feel that we work very well in the community, we work with several community organizations here in Brookline. Steps to Success, Next Steps, the Brookline Walk and Talk, Brookline Police Department Walk and Talk program, the Brookline Early Education program, BEEP, and also the Brookline Community Health Center and Springwell. They provide services for elders to age in place. So we're very pleased with those partnerships. On a little bit of a larger scale, we're very pleased that the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development awarded us its high performer ranking this past year. We are working on energy efficiency improvements with Amoresco of Framingham, and also we're very pleased that we're going to be developing 32 units of family housing. This is affordable housing over on our Dummer Street property. It is the first larger scale development of affordable housing in Brookline in over 30 years. So those are some of the things that we focused on. I have been very pleased to be part of the BHA, and I look forward to continuing this work. And I'm asking you to consider voting for me for a second term as a commissioner of the Brookline Housing Authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne, for giving us a personal face to the Brookline Housing Authority.
Thank you very much.
And telling us about the work of the Housing Authority. I think that if we have just 1 or 2 questions from the audience, we could do that if there are questions for her about the Brookline housing situation. Yeah, if you would come up here, it would be helpful.
Oh, Garry Jones, and one of my concerns is affordable housing, and I know that, what?
Closer to the mic. Get closer to the mic, you can't.
Oh, okay. How's this? Is that better?
That's great.
One of my concerns is affordable housing in Brookline because we don't seem to have enough of it. And I know that you're having a big project over near BU. I don't know the streets that well, but when I drive by there, I know there's going to be a development with a lot of new units, new affordable units that's going to be owned by the Housing Authority. Could you just briefly describe what's that and how long it is, how far along it is?
Yes, that's the Dummer Street project that I referred to previously. It's over 30 units of family housing. We expect construction to begin in June of this year, and we expect to be finished by next year. We are actually taking Brookline Housing Authority property creating housing and then taking the parking and putting it underneath, and being sure that in the middle of the current housing on that property and the new housing, there is going to be a brand-new common space and community space, including playgrounds and a basketball court for residents and their children, and also for folks who live in the neighborhood. So we're really pleased that this is going forward.
Thanks, Sean.
You're welcome. If I may, Margaret, if there are further questions for the BHA, you can certainly address them to me. If you go on the Brookline Housing Authority website, you can send an email. I'd be happy to respond if there's no time this evening. Thank you.
All right. Is there one more question from the audience? Thank you, Joanne, for your time this evening and for letting us get acquainted with you.
Thank you.
We will move on to the candidates for library trustee, if they will come forward. Do you have an order?
The ballot is what we're using.
What?
So it'll be Garry and Karen.
Thank you.
Get to a microphone.
Oh, thank you. As your handout indicates, there are 4 candidates for library trustee this year. 3 of them are with us this evening: Garry Jones, Karen Livingston, and Magdalene Moran. This is a very interesting and challenging time for the Brookline Public Library. They have been going through some very good planning and evaluating of themselves in recent times. And this year they face the very special challenge of finding a new director for the Brookline Public Library, as our current director is retiring very shortly. So we're asking them tonight to make short statements. We will want them to tell us a bit about who they are and why they're running, but we would really like you to spend your very short time telling us what you hope to see happen in the future of the Brookline Public Library. So we're going to start alphabetically and just work around the table. So we'll start with Garry Jones.
Thank you. My name is Garry Jones, as she's been saying, and I've been a library trustee for some time. Very proud to be a library trustee, and I'm proud of the Brookline Libraries. And I'm a father of 3 children that went through the Brookline schools and now have 5 grandchildren. And I'm also proud of the Brookline community, because it is a community. It's a community that tries to do things. And what I'm concerned about is, I want to say, and this gives me an opportunity to say what a wonderful librarian we've had over all the years, and I've been on the board quite a few years, but as long as I've been there, Chuck Flaherty has been our library director of our 3 libraries, and we've been fortunate, very fortunate to have him, because he's been a wonderful, able director. You know, he's proactive, he really comes at the board with ideas. He wants to follow through and be the best, Brookline be the best library that we could have. And my feeling is, if we can get somebody soon, because he's leaving shortly, my ideal would be to sort of clone Chuck Flaherty. That would be my ideal. But by doing that, the board is reaching out in an inclusive way to search for diversity, to search for minorities, and to be inclusive. And at the same time, we want to recognize that we want the best qualified librarian, a librarian like Chuck Flaherty. Thank you.
That's good. I'm Karen Livingston, and I'm currently the chairman of the board.
Also the mic.
And I'm currently the chairman of the board, thanks, of the library. One of the things that I have enjoyed over the last 14 years as a trustee is the flexibility of the board. And if a board member has the energy and has ideas, they can really get out and make things happen. And I wanted to thank Joanne. I thought I'd do it here because we partner, the library partners, with so many community organizations. I recognize many of you in the audience with whom we work. And we recently, the Coolidge Corner Library Children's Room is getting a facelift. And I think all of you patrons will be excited to hear that. We're getting new children's furniture. We're kind of moving things around. We got a handicap bathroom. And all of the old furniture and shelving that is still usable is going into a new space that's created in the Housing Authority at 22 High Street. And we're working with Steps to Success and BEEP to create a program, mentoring program, using that furniture. And it's just one of many examples, since I only have a couple seconds left, of ways that we work with organizations in town to benefit everyone. Well, I hope you'll have a lot of questions for us, so I'll just pass it to Magdalene. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. I'm Magdalene Moran. I've been a Brookline resident for the past 15 years. I have a 6-year-old son who attends Driscoll. And my day job is I work as Vice President of Biology for Hydra Biosciences, which is a small biotech company. And as part of that, I'm responsible for overseeing a budget, for hiring, and for driving an innovative staff to a common goal. And so I see a lot of the collaborative aspects of this position relevant to what we need to do at the library. One of the things that we've done over the past couple of years, as I've worked on the programming committee since 2012, is start to establish not only the types of partnerships that Karen was discussing, but also partnerships with the private sector. So we've gotten donations for the First 20s and 30s event aimed at people in their 20s and 30s. I successfully solicited tickets from Sony Pictures for the debut of Monuments Men. And so we're trying to take some innovative approaches here. In terms of the future, I think one of the major things, obviously, is going to be the hiring of the new library director, and there are a couple of things that I'd like to see this person focus on. The first is going to be putting into place a strategy for talent retention. Any organization is really defined by the people who comprise it. And one of the challenges that we have as a library is really making sure that we're able to retain the key talent that we're attracting. We also need someone who understands the changing landscape and role of libraries. Libraries will no longer be simply a repository for media. They're going to need to be more interactive. We're going to have to continue the transition that I think has been started very successfully into the digital age and balance those digital resources with our physical resources. And so that's really one of the things that I'm looking forward to helping define and helping find the right director.
We saw a very popular development in the past year at the Coolidge Corner branch with the addition of Sunday hours, which have been very well utilized. I have a question from the audience which asks the candidates to please say a few words about what you hope might happen with the Putterham branch, another important unit of the Brookline Public Library. I'm going to start in the middle this time, and we'll let Karen start answering that one, and then work around with Magdalene and Garry.
Well, we're very fortunate to have a new branch manager, Kelly Unsworth. We're very fortunate to have a new branch manager at Putterham, and with a new library director, with a new branch manager, things change a little. And so, and there are other employee changes at Putterham too. We're hoping to very shortly restore the gardens in front and on the side of Putterham, and to start using those gardens for more activities. We aren't going to change the hours at Putterham. We don't have the money, we don't have the staff. So we'll just keep on with our programming. We're lucky to have Regina running the senior social at Potterham, which has been very successful. And in fact, we're starting a slightly different but senior-oriented program at Maine next month. So, you know, we're you know, doing things differently because we have new staff and refreshing things.
Magdalene?
I think Karen captured it very well. I think one of the questions that has come up that I'll address directly, that Karen alluded to, is, you know, would there be an increase in hours at Potterham? And it's something that we've certainly discussed, and I think it's something we'd all like to see in an ideal world. But as we recognize, this isn't an ideal world, and we're in a situation where we're talking about budget overrides, and there are significant resource constraints. And as such, as Karen says, we don't envision an increase in hours as Potterham, though it's something I think we all would love to see if it were possible. The sense from Chuck and from looking at the budget is at this point it's not possible. So we look to continue to develop Potterham, continue to have some programming at Potterham, which we have with the Korean event and some other events. And you know, we think it's a critical part of our library. So I think the renovations and additions that Karen talks about will help fortify it as we go forward.
Thank you. Garry?
Yeah, there's a distinctive difference between Potterham and Coolidge Corner. Coolidge Corner is in an urban area. And to me, it's quite remarkable that Coolidge Corner Library, if it was a standalone library, it would have just about in the top 20, I believe, was the circulation. So we're talking about a very, very active library, you know, all during the week, not just on Sunday. But Potterham, its circulation is not, you know, is not as great as Coolidge Corner. And the problem basically is, if we had more unlimited resources, you know, we'd be happy to have. We all love libraries. I think that the library board, everyone on the board, what we have in common is a love for libraries, or we wouldn't be here on the Board of Library Trustees. And, you know, we'd all like to do more, but we're facing a situation, especially next year with an override for the schools, basically. It's, you know, it's a constraining time. And that's really the problem. But if we had a different time, you know, certainly we could be more open. But there is that distinction between, and it's an important one, I think, between an urban Coolidge Corner Library with a very high circulation versus Potterham. And I happen to love Potterham because it wasn't until a library trustee that I actually crossed Route 9 to go over there. And one of my friends was a library trustee, Max Schwartz, that lived in the, he said, "You got to come over and look at our library." And you know, I go over there once in a while because I like it. It's a wonderful library. It's you know, we not just have one library, two libraries, we have three. And we understand that.
Thank you. The three libraries are very different, and thank you for the three candidates for presenting your ideas about what needs to happen with the library. The fourth candidate, Jonathan Margolis, is not with us this evening, but a reminder to the audience that the public library belongs to all of us. And we do need to be users of that library, but we do have the opportunity also to express our concerns and our wishes to the people who serve on the trustees of the public library. And they also have the Friends of the Public Library, which can be very useful organizations supporting the library too. Thank you to the candidates. Thank you for being with us tonight, and thank you for being on the ballot.
Thanks.
Thank you for the forum.
And we are going to move on at this point to the candidates who are selectmen. So if we can have the four candidates, please come forward.
Yeah. Anne.
We have something in common.
We have 4 candidates who are running for selectmen. We will elect 2 selectmen, so listen carefully to what they have to tell us this evening. We will begin our introduction of them by having them, one after the other, introduce themselves to us, and we will limit most all of their comments to 2-minute segments. They're working with a timekeeper here in the front row. We will ask them in the first place to simply spend their time telling us who they are and why they wish to run and represent us as selectmen. So we'll start with Nancy Daley.
Thank you. Well, I'm happy to see such a great crowd here tonight. Have served for 3 terms on the Board of Selectmen. I was chairman for 3 years in that span, and the most recently I am the Selectmen's representative to the Council on Aging. I'm also co-chair with Frank Caro, who I think is here tonight, of the Age Friendly City effort that we have been designated by the World Health Organization as an age-friendly town, really, not city. I am also chairman of the town's audit committee, and I have spent a lot of time this past year chairing the Selectmen's Committee on Diversity and Inclusion, and we have drafted a bylaw to revise the Human Relations Commission that will be before this town meeting, and had a very excellent group of people on that committee and a lot of interest and input from members of the public. So I'm also on a bunch of other committees, but I will I'll stop with those because that's what I've been spending a lot of time on lately. All of us are working on issues in connection with the proposed large expansion at Hancock Village. And why I'm running again. I think right now, I'm sure you have all heard that we are facing this sort of dramatic increase in our school-age population. And we are discussing, we have a committee looking into all the ins and outs of what we might need to do in terms of an override. And I think that there's a lot of very complex issues, and there's a lot of trade-offs we're going to have to make. And so I decided that it might be good to have someone with experience in there making some of those decisions.
And our second candidate is Brooks Ames, and we'll ask Brooks to introduce himself.
Good evening. I am a parent of 2 children at the Heath School. Noelia is in 1st grade, and Gigi is in 5th grade. I also attended the Heath School and am almost a lifelong resident of Brookline. One of the things that I've seen change over time in Brookline is our diversity. When I went to Heath School, there were many fewer children of color than there are now. We're now living in a town that's changed quite a bit since 30 years ago. 40% of the children in our schools are children of color. And I think that we as a town really need to do a better job opening up ourselves up to the community we live in, listening to the people in the community, and making sure that everybody is represented and has a seat at the table when decisions are made. One area that I've been particularly concerned about, and one of the reasons that I'm running for selectman, is that the town has not been successful in appointing a department head of color in over 40 years. We have 25 department heads in Brookline, and the selectmen are responsible for appointing department heads. So the buck stops with the selectmen. And my view is that if we don't have a real change at the top, at the Board of Selectmen, we're not going to have a change in the composition of our workforce. And I think it's important because it reflects on our values as a community. And I'd like to see the community represent the 40% of children of color in our schools and really start thinking about what the future of Brookline is going to look like.
Thank you. The third candidate is Arthur Wellington Conquest, and we will hear from him next.
The third. Arthur Wellington Conquest, the third.
The third?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Good evening. I moved to Brookline in 1982 because I was searching for a community where my two children could acquire a decent education. A week after moving to 116 Tappan Street, someone placed a flyer in my front hallway inviting me to attend a Black Achievement presentation by School Superintendent Slater in the library at Brookline High School. I attended that meeting, and thus was born my involvement as a concerned citizen in this community. Since then, I've been involved with the following initiatives. I was president of the Brookline High School PTO in 1992. I was a member of the Brookline High School School Site Council in 94 through 98, a member of the Lincoln Devotion Pierce School Community Partnership. I was co-chair of the Brookline Black Achievement Committee, 93 to 2000, director, Black Achievement, Saturday Science, Math and Science Laboratory, president and member of the Brookline Adult and Community Education Program, 1992 to present, co-chair, corresponding secretary, vice president of the Town Meeting Members Association, as a member of the subcommittee for snow removal, executive board and member of Brookline PACS, 97 and 99. I was chair of the Dr. Martin Luther King Community Celebration Committee, the Roland Hayes Celebration Committee, spring of '07 through '11, member of the Brookline Climate Action Day Committee, '06 through '08, a member of the Single Parent Outreach Program. I've also been a town meeting member from 1997 until now. Thank you.
And our fourth candidate this evening is Benjamin Franco.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you tonight. I want to take a moment and thank the League of Women Voters, the Neighborhood Alliance, and the Town Meeting Members Association for organizing tonight's event. I think it's a great opportunity for all of us to speak directly to all of you and the voters. I grew up in Brookline. I grew up on Amory Street, attended the Brookline Public Schools, and have lived here for nearly all my life. Also a Brookline homeowner. Spent the early part of my career working for the state. I was the legislative director for a state senator, and now work for Harvard University in their government relations department. And I do economic impact analysis, so try and demonstrate why Harvard matters to Boston, to Cambridge, to Eastern Massachusetts. It's a critical time in Brookline, and especially a critical time to run for selectman. We've had blossoming school enrollment, and that enrollment increase has put pressure both on the town's financial resources and on our school infrastructure, our capital resources. And that enrollment increase, coupled with looming decisions about what appropriate development is and the way municipal services going forward, makes this election a critically important one. I'm running for selectman because I think I have a set of skills and some knowledge which could benefit the town navigate these near-term problems and strengthen the board. As I said, I'm a former state employee and knowledgeable about the ways of the legislature, and I think it's critically important to have somebody with that expertise, that knowledge on the board at a time when we're going to the legislature advocating for increased Chapter 70 money, that's education aid, Mass School Building Resource Authority, funding for school renovation or expansion, and additional local aid. And I want to bring that expertise to the Board of Selectmen to strengthen the board and to benefit the town. And it's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to the conversation tonight. Thank you.
All right. I have been given a nice pile of those green cards, which were handed out to the audience, with questions that they have submitted to us. And the first question is worded very simply, so we have to try this one out, which has to do with the understanding of tax classifications with the candidates. We're going to start this time with Benjamin and work our way backward, I think, in answering. We'll mix up the order in which we ask these questions. But the questioner says this: please provide your position on tax classification as it relates to the commercial tax rate.
Interesting question. As many of you know, we have a split classification in Brookline where we can shift the tax burden or have a different tax burden for residential taxpayers, commercial taxpayers, and then the industrial taxpayers. I think that that there needs to be a blend of the burden needs to be spread across all the taxpayers, and I think that the commercial taxpayers are a critical member of our town community, and that needs to be reflected in tax policy, and need to be mindful of the fact that Brookline and Boston is sometimes a difficult business climate, and when setting the different rates, we need to be mindful of that and make sure that we're not overburdening our tax our business community. Excuse me.
Is it Arthur Conquest? Am I next?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think that we need to have a balance in terms of how we assess taxes on our community. And I think that it shouldn't be one group, it shouldn't be the commercial group that absorbs any more of a tax burden than the residents. And I know that there is a lot of concern with the possibility of an override coming, that people feel that they may be unnecessarily taxed. But in order for us to continue to have us have a thriving community, I think everybody in the town has to assume some responsibility for how we dig into our pockets to make sure that everybody is served with services in this town.
I would not change the allocation. I would not change the allocation. I think from what I've seen, the Chamber of Commerce has been trying to advocate for business and seem to be okay with the current allocation. I am concerned as we go next year to the voters and ask them to vote for an override. I think it's really important that we do everything we can to make sure that the most vulnerable in our community are protected. And Arthur and I have sponsored an article in town meeting that will expand the senior citizen property tax deferral program. It's a program that permits seniors who meet the income qualifications to defer their taxes until they sell their home or until they pass away. And it's a way to provide some needed relief to a senior who may be struggling to pay their necessary expenses and living expenses.
Okay, so we have now less than 10% of our tax base is commercial, unfortunately. It's kind of shrunk over the years as condos went into buildings that might have been commercial at one time. So what the rate for many years that we shifted was 1.75 for the commercial. So for every dollar you as a homeowner paid, a business would pay 1.75. In the last couple years, in being mindful of the economic climate, we have rolled that back a little bit, and we've been at 1.73-ish, around there. I'm sure the businesses would like that to be even lower, but there are, our taxes are pretty high for homeowners, and so that has traditionally been a method to provide some relief to homeowners. The other thing that we do is we have used the homeowners exemption. So if you live in your property, you can get an exemption for a certain first percentage. So that is supposed to help particularly lower income folks.
All right. The second question, which has been submitted to us, has to do with a situation which has long been brewing in Brookline, and this is the Chestnut Hill project at Hancock Village, which, as it went through approval processes quite some time ago, was denied, but when submitted in an amended form, was subsequently approved. And the questioner would like to know, given that the town right now has a lawsuit filed regarding this, what further steps would you take to address this situation as Brookline deals with the state? And this time, I think we'll start with Brooks and work through Arthur and Benjamin and back to Nancy.
I think the Hancock Village situation is a very challenging one for the town. Part of my background is I'm a lawyer, and I have worked on 40B projects. I have counseled developers in friendly 40Bs, and I've counseled developers in adversarial 40Bs. That's the situation that the town is right now. And I know from experience that the state law is heavily stacked in favor of the developer of a 40B project. So that means that the town's leverage is limited. But I think it's very important that the town try to come to an agreement with the developer that may not be what everybody wants, but would be the best deal that we can get. Because I would hate to see the town spend a lot of money on experts and lawyers and drag this out for years and years and then lose. I think it's much better to try to reach a negotiated agreement.
I've kind of halfway followed the battle that has been going on between the landlord, between the developer and the town over the years regarding Hancock Village. And I think if I had my druthers, I would lock the developer and the town in a room for about 10 minutes or maybe a half hour and just say, you're not going to leave until you guys work this thing out. I think it's been going on far too long, and I think there's an ugly undertone that we have to deal with the problem, and I don't care if the developer has to give something and the town has to give something, but we have to deal with it. It's gone on too long. So and who am I to say? I'm not a lawyer, and who am I to say who's right or who's wrong? But it has to get dealt with. And another thing, Brooks and I went and knocked on the doors of some of the residents at the Hancock Village. It was interesting how many people from Hancock Village come from, that are not citizens, come from a foreign country. And I just thought that was very, very interesting, that people from Hancock Village don't really, are not citizens in this country and don't have a sense of what's really going on out there.
The Hancock Village project, or the 40B proposal at Hancock Village, I think is one of the two most pressing issues facing the town. This is a project that's going to add a tremendous burden to the town, both financially and infrastructure-wise. We're looking at the need to possibly expand the Baker School beyond our current enrollment pressures. There's the possibility that we're going to have to add a fire company at the cost of about $1 million a year. So there's this is a real townwide concern. I am opposed to the Hancock Village proposal, the 40B proposal as it stands now. And to answer the question, I think that the way that we deal with this beyond continuing to contest the lawsuit is continue to exert pressure through our legislators, through public statements of dismay, through working our various channels to mass development and demonstrate our town-wide opposition to this. I will say that I support affordable housing. I think that it's critically important, but any development, whether residential or commercial, needs to respect the surrounding neighborhood and the burden that it's going to place on the community in which it's sited.
Yeah, I just to explain a little bit about where it actually is now, as Margaret said, they applied to mass development once, and they were about to be turned down, so they pulled that, and they applied again with a slightly different proposal, and they got accepted. It has not yet been, it is before our zoning board of appeals right now. And so it has not yet been accepted by our zoning board of appeals. And the town has presented a lot of information to the zoning board of appeals about our many serious concerns with this project. And I want to emphasize that the Board of Selectmen has been very supportive of good affordable housing projects, but I don't think this one is meets the criteria. It's 40B means they're proposing 20% affordable units, and in return, the state law says they can grossly override our local zoning controls. They have actually been, I'm not surprised that you found many foreign families in there. We know that they have actually been marketing to families. Many come here from Korea and Israel who are working here for a couple of years. Come over, bring your kids. We've got, a great place for you to live. There's a school right up at the end of the hill. And, it's a, pleasant place to live for when you're here just for a couple of years. They're sending almost 250 kids to the Baker School out of that project right now. And quite frankly, the way they've designed this project, we had a 2-year-long process that I chaired with some local neighbors, and we discussed various aspects of this, and they have put the bulk of the development right in the area nearest to the single-family homes, exactly where we told them, please don't put the bulk of the development. And they are developing the kind of units that would engender a lot of kids. I would even go farther than Ben and say I'm afraid we're going to need to build an entire new school if they're able to proceed. So I think it's something we have to keep raising our concerns very forcefully.
In looking at our questions, housing and schools are obviously big concerns these days of the residents of Brookline. And the next question, which has been submitted to us, has to do with the schools. And it's worded very simply again, which says, can I count on you to support the continuance of a robust Metco program for Brookline? I'm going to start this one again with Benjamin and work back around the group.
Certainly. I think that Metco is a critical part of the Brookline Public Schools. As a graduate of the schools, I can speak firsthand to the diversity, both racially, but also in terms of intellectual approach and backgrounds that Metco provides. I support the Metco program. I am unwilling to write a blank check, though. I think that there needs to be a way to keep Metco in the schools, but that doesn't mean that, regardless of the cost or the pressures that it places upon our school system, we're going to retain it. And that may come as sort of a shock to some people based on some earlier comments I've made, but we need to realize that we have significant enrollment pressures in our school system, and we need to be responsible and make sure that we provide a quality education for our homegrown students, our Brookline students, and when possible and when available, bring in Metco students and material fee students.
I think it was about a month ago that there was a B-Space or some other kind of meeting right here in this room, and a black student came up to the podium and made the following statement. I'm paraphrasing, kind of. He said, "If it weren't for the Metco program, I think I would be the only black student in my class." And the world is changing. And, you know, we've got people coming from every section of the world coming to this country. 53% of Boston is black, Latino, and Asian. You know, we've got a black president, and we need to find a way to have diversity and inclusion and keep it in our schools. If it means that Medco is one of the ways for that to happen, then I think it has to go in that direction. And we have to find ways to make it pay for itself. I don't have all the answers, but we need to, I think Metco is an integral part of our school system. It has been for the past 40 years, and we need to continue to move in that direction. And I think that there are other things as well. I think we've got to find ways in which to increase the number of black and Latino teachers in our schools. But in terms of the Medco program, I think that it's important that we make a commitment to those children and those families from Boston to be in our schools.
I support the Metco program 100%, and I don't see it as a special interest or something that just helps the black children and Latino children who come to Brookline from Boston. I see it as something that is a core value of our community. The program educates all of our children. I believe that we need to learn in an environment where we're exposed to all sorts of different people, and that is what the Metco program provides to all of us. So I'm 100% for the Metco program, and I believe that the selectmen have a critical role in preserving the Metco program, because when we go to the voters with an override number, that number is going to have baked inside of it a whole mess of value judgments. And if the selectmen pick a number that's too low, they will toss it over to the school committee and force the school committee to cut valuable programs. It may be Metco, it may be materials fee, it may be technology. But I think it's critically important that when we go to the voters, we are selling a vision of excellence for the schools, and that includes Metco and materials fee. I went to school with a Brookline, who's a person who's now a Brookline police officer, Bobby Tian. He does not live in town. He lives in West Roxbury. But his daughter goes to first grade with my daughter. And I think it enriches all of us for the town employees to be able to send their children to our schools, because it provides an investment in the community for them. And that's good for all of us.
I've always been a big fan of the Metco program. My kids went to the Runkle School, which, particularly at the time my son went, was not naturally very diverse. So the Metco kids brought not only racial and ethnic diversity, but socioeconomic diversity, which I think was extremely valuable for my kids as well as those kids who were coming here. So I am a big fan of it. We may have to be thoughtful about which where we're taking the Metco kids, so we can put them into where we have spots, and not just sort of blindly say we're taking X number in kindergarten or something, but take them at the place so that we're not, because we are faced with a kind of explosion in our schools, and when it gets to the point of actually talking about building new buildings, we have to be careful. I mean, there is I think a limited amount to what the taxpayers can pay. But I would fight strongly to see the program continue.
All right. The next question moves us toward consideration of the upcoming warrant articles. Without elaborating on the question, the questioner asks, what is your position on warrant article 29 submitted by Brookline Local First? This time I think we'll start with Brooks and work back this way and end up with Nancy again.
This is the sort of question that I think every candidate fears. There's 30 some odd warrant articles. I read about this in the newspaper, and so that's where my knowledge comes from. And the debate seems to center on what counts as local. There's some of our business owners are concerned that the definition of local doesn't include people who are franchisees. So I am sensitive to that concern. I think the petitioners have their hearts in the right place in terms of buying local. But I'd like to see, that the concerns of everyone, including franchisees, addressed.
Arthur?
I'm going to pass.
I applaud the group that submitted this warrant article, Article 29. I think that we need to be very mindful and support our local businesses. There are a number of businesses in town which this community has embraced and cherishes, and we need to be supportive of them, make sure that they continue to thrive in this community and in a difficult business environment regionally and nationally. I share Brooks' concerns and want to make sure that everybody is protected. We're about a month away from town meeting, and I am anxious to see the process that unfolds as the advisory committee and the Board of Selectmen and town meeting members confer and dissect and as the warrant article is revised and hopefully improved or altered to reflect everybody's concerns. So I think it's critically important that we protect our local businesses and hopefully we can over the next month and a half get to a place where everybody is comfortable and sort of locally owned businesses that are not franchises are taken care of, as well as our locally owned franchise businesses.
Well, I like the idea of supporting our local businesses. There's a number of problems with that warrant article as it's currently is written. Not only the question of franchisees, but the question of what is local. If they're have a branch over in Cambridge as well as Brookline or something, does that mean they're not local? So there's a lot of issues there. The other problem is that it is seeking to have the town try to buy locally when it can, but we are subject to the state's laws on looking for the low bidder on things, and we have to follow the state law on many of our contracts if they're over a certain size. So I do like the concept. We whenever we're setting the tax rates, we have a discussion about, isn't there some way we could help small independent businesses. It's hard to do through the tax policy. It's hard to say I like you, so I'm going to tax you less than the other business next door. But I'd be happy to further explore ways to help our local businesses. I think that the article though needs a lot of work.
We've received a rather related question on the issue of taxation, taxes always being a popular voter topic. And this question is, how about taxing some of the nonprofits or not-for-profits that do business in town? So let's hear from the candidates about this aspect of taxing. And again, I'll go with you, Benjamin, and then we'll go around to Nancy for the second answer.
So we have an aggressive pilot program, a payment in lieu of taxes program in Brookline, and credit to our finance director, Steve Cirillo, who is probably the most feared person amongst the nonprofit community, because whenever they see him coming, they know that they got to get the wallet out. We've done a great job over the past, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, we signed a pilot agreement with Boston University, who now pays over $1 million in payment in lieu of taxes to the town. I think that we really do need to make sure that our nonprofits, and those are educational institutions, as well as religious and cultural groups, contribute to the town. I think that pilot payments are one of the ways, a financial payment is one of the ways they do that, and I encourage our nonprofit community to do that. But we also need to make sure that we play to these nonprofit groups' core constituencies and core competencies. So Boston University, for example, should be providing tutoring and educational support to our schools. Northeastern University provides use of their athletic facilities, and I would encourage our other nonprofits, religious institutions, to provide space and support to Brookline groups. So I think the pilot is critically important, and I think that we should pass the can where possible, but we should also encourage nonprofits to contribute resources where appropriate.
Nancy.
Okay. Yeah, as Ben said, we do have a very aggressive payment in lieu of taxes program. And the reason is because you cannot tax nonprofit if they have a 501c3 status or some other nonprofit status. You can't tax them. You cannot make them pay you taxes. But what we do is Steve Cirillo has gone to them and said, look, you benefit from being in our town. If you have an emergency call, we send a fire truck or an ambulance to you. We send our police when you have a problem. So we want you to give back in some way. And we have been doing a very good job. And in fact, other communities have been looking to us as a model in that area. It is very important because the sort of nonprofit sector has been growing in Brookline. BU, the hospitals, others have been taking up more and more of our space. So, you know, we worry about that shrinking tax base if they're all going nonprofit. The parcel right where we call it the B2 parcel, but right across from the Brook House, it's where Bertucci's used to be. That's how you may know it. Is Brookline. There's a building there that's has medical offices. There's another building. That whole parcel is now owned by Children's Hospital. And we have been working with them and asking them to please develop it in a way that we would get tax revenue out of that property, not develop it in such a way that Children's Hospital would expand their nonprofit use and not give us any revenue. So it actually has been a good, I hope that will move ahead. I hope that will pass at town meeting, the warrant articles, and we will actually get some substantial revenue out of that parcel.
Thank you. Brooks.
I think we've maybe have a point of common agreement, which is that we all agree that nonprofits should contribute to Brookline's tax base to the extent that we can apply pressure and get them to do that. I think about it a little bit in terms of this Hancock Village situation. Nancy was talking about 250 children in the Baker schools as sort of being transient children. I don't think about it that way. I think that if the children are in our schools, they're our children, and there are many different points of entry that people get into Brookline. Just because you come in through Hancock Village doesn't mean you're worth anything less than someone who was born and raised in Brookline and sends their children to Brookline schools. The nonprofits, we have Dexter, we have Park, they don't pay anything. They're educating children who come from outside of Brookline. And we are not getting tax revenue because we afford them nonprofit status. So I think if we're going to be complaining about Hancock Village and the burdens of Hancock Village, at the same time we should be very aggressive about going after Park and Dexter.
And Arthur?
Everybody should contribute something to the kitty. Everybody in town, nonprofits included, have their streets plowed when it snows. We don't pull the blade of the plow up when we go past, say, BU, or we might go past Maimonides School, or just because I walk up Route 9 often and go past Maimonides School, and I know that they plow their sidewalks, but our trucks clear their streets as well. We also do leaf removal around properties of various private schools. Everybody should contribute something, and I would support anything that Steve Cirillo does to get nonprofits, whether we're talking about the big guys like BU or even religious institutions, to contribute something in the way of paying their way for being in the town and using space in some ways. You can, if you don't have the money, you can maybe allow our children to use your fields, but something. So I see the pilot program as just as important as somebody putting $1 in the can, or whatever someone like BU, $1 million, would put towards their tax deferral for the town.
Thank you. We're going to turn to quite a different question. We're working with questions from our live audience tonight, which helps us to look at a good variety of issues and concerns that people have. This is a question that our candidates might or might not have thought so much about. The questioner reminds us that Brookline seems to be a very earth-friendly community, that we have many earth-friendly activities, but we have one of the most restrictive beekeeping permitting requirements in the country. And the questioner wants to know, might you consider working toward making Brookline more bee-friendly by changing the regulatory requirements, which are very inappropriate for a community that strives to be earth-friendly? I might also remind the audience and the panel of candidates, some of you are already aware that America is currently going through a very serious problem with the bee population, which is likely to really affect our food supply in a very short number of years. And scientists are really addressing this issue very, very seriously right now. So here is a question about, can we make Brookline more bee-friendly? And this time, we'll start with Brooks again.
I'd like to talk to the person who gave that question. That's an interesting question. One of my classmates at Heath School, who is also a Heath parent now, his father, after being a lawyer for many years, went back to school and got a degree. I didn't know you could do this, but he got a degree in beekeeping. And they have I don't know what the technical term for this is, but they have 4 or 5 hives in their backyard in Brookline. And every year around Christmas time, we always get a jar of honey. It's the Mason family honey. So my experience, that's my experience, is that the Masons seem to be doing fine producing honey for the Ameses every year, and maybe for everyone else on their list, their Christmas list. So that's the best I can do. I love honey. I'm all for honey.
Okay. Arthur?
I would like to take a look at the bee restriction law. I have my mother-in-law used to have bees in her backyard, and her next-door neighbor discovered that she had bees in the backyard and threatened to sue her. And so she had to pack her bees up and close things down. But I think we just have to be mindful that maybe some people may be extremely allergic to bees, and it might cause death in some cases, and that's something that we need to really look at if we want to think about having people have bees within the town limits. So I would want to see first what what our laws actually say with regard to bees before I make a decision or comment.
Like Arthur, I need to familiarize myself with the restrictions on beekeeping in Brookline. It's not something I've thought a tremendous amount about, which is not to speak to its importance or lack of importance. It's just something that I'm not familiar with. I think that I would welcome the opportunity to explore the restrictions on keeping bees, the ease with which people can keep bees in Brookline, and find out more about it and figure out if there's an opportunity, a way to make it easier to have a beehive in your backyard that balances the importance of having a thriving bee community and the concerns of residents of the town of Butters.
Nancy?
I have to confess, I have not spent a lot of time on the bee issue, but I think Arthur may have hit it on the head. I suspect that concern for people with allergies may be the reason why we have a restrictive rule, but I'd certainly be willing to take a look at it. I know that sometimes in the schools, they're not even letting kids bring peanut butter sandwiches because other kids have severe peanut allergies, so that there would be, I'm sure, a lot of discussion about the risk that bees might pose in a fairly densely populated area, but I certainly wouldn't be opposed to having a discussion about it.
Thank you. We have some more serious questions coming along, and the next question is serious, but I'm going to ask the candidates to be very quick in answering it. At the end of the session this evening, you will be given the opportunity to give a short wrap-up of your opinions and ideas as to your candidacy for selectman. But we have a very direct question from the audience, and I'm sure we all ask this as we think about candidates. So, in 1 minute each, will you please tell us, why should we vote for you? And this time, we'll start with Arthur and work backward. We'll go Arthur, Brooks, Nancy, and then back around to the end with Benjamin.
What's the timing on this?
1 minute. Why should we vote for you, Arthur?
I can do it in 5 seconds.
Well, just do it.
I'm the best looking. No. Again, I started out by listing just some of the things that I've done in the town over the last 30 years. And I think that I have much more that I can contribute to the town. There are a lot of things that are happening, that have happened in this town that can be attributed to Arthur Conquest, that I'm sure many of you have no idea that I've participated in. From the from the Steps to Success program to the Martin Luther King celebration and so on and so forth. I've done a lot of things. I've brought a lot of energy to this town, and that's why I think you need to vote for me so I can continue to be involved.
Thank you. Brooks?
Well, when we were putting together our campaign literature, I got some good advice. Someone told me, never tell voters what they should do, because people don't like to be told what they should do. So I'll tell you why I hope that you will vote for me and why I think that I would be a good choice for selectman. There's a lot of discussion about collaboration, and I think that that's very important. But I think it's also important at the selectman level that we have people who are willing to fight for principles. And I view this election in some ways as being a referendum. It's a referendum on a number of things. It's a referendum on Metco. You have candidates who are 100% for Metco, and you have candidates who say, well, we can cut back a little here, or maybe we can cut back a little there. I don't agree with that. It's a referendum on diversity in our workforce. Since 2006, we've hired 6 department heads and a town administrator. They've all been white. I think that should change going forward. So there's a choice, and I hope you make that choice for us.
Thank you. Well, we are going to have we're going to have an override on the ballot in the next year or so. And there are a lot of very serious questions that go into deciding how big that override is going to be and what its components are going to be. And some of them is having a sense for what the voters might be willing to accept. Some of it is having a sense of what the competing interests are in town, that, you know, who might get hurt if you favor another group, or what the trade-offs are for people. I think that this is what really prompted me to run again. I think it's a very complex and serious set of issues before us, and I think I can offer a lot of experience in dealing with them.
And Benjamin?
In my sort of introductory remarks, I cited my state experience, and I'm going to return to that for my first part of this answer. I think that at a time when we're advocating for increased local aid, for increased educational aid, for funding from the MSBA, and find ourselves in a little bit of a financial pinch in town, it's critically important to have somebody who's got that state level experience, who knows the state system and knows the personalities there to effectively articulate the case for why Brookline needs to see that additional revenue. The second part of my answer is that I've got really vast experience in town, especially on budget issues. I served for 5 years on the Finance Committee, the Advisory Committee in Brookline. For the last 3 years, I was the chair of a subcommittee. And I think at a time when Brookline has some short near-term difficulties, particularly financially and related to the schools, it's important to have a broad-based experience on the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you. The next question is serious, and we received it in different forms, and I'm going to share with you the fullest form. We have lagged behind in our workforce at diversity and have been sued for discrimination twice in the last year and a half. How will you support a Human Relations Commission that does want to make a difference and move us forward? In practical, real terms, how will you help the commission, help the town and community? And I'm going to start with Nancy on this one.
Okay. Well, as I mentioned, I think at the beginning, I chaired the Selectmen's Committee on Diversity and Inclusion this past year, and we worked very hard on creating a new bylaw that will be before this upcoming town meeting that I think will bring the Human Relations Commission, we've renamed it in our bylaw to the Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations Commission, but I think it will make it much more relevant and effective than what we've had in the past. And some of the things we've written into that bylaw would provide for communication going both ways from various the town Human Resources Department, the schools, although I know they're contesting that part of the bylaw, and various other groups to the Human Relations Commission, and also a report coming from the Human Relations Commission that would go to these various entities, citing, problems or giving advice or suggestions. And so I think that all of that will be, I think it will make it a much more effective commission than it has been. In addition, I think members of my committee who were professionals in this area came up with a number of very good suggestions for the town's Human Resources Department and other aspects of that, our recruiting, et cetera, that I think when we finish up, we will have a report that will be very helpful for the town in many ways, in addition to our efforts to rewrite the bylaw for the Human Relations Commission.
Well, this is a subject that's near and dear to me because I am on the Human Relations Commission. One concrete suggestion I would make is that I think we need to do a little more work on the naming. That was one of the challenges, that's one of the challenges the town's had. It has a Human Relations Commission and a Human Resources Board, and no one can tell the difference. And now we're going to have a Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations Commission, which, if you think about it, the acronym is DICKR. And I don't think we should have a DICKR commission. So that's number one. Number two, I believe that personnel is policy. Who you choose for committees, commissions, department heads says a lot about policy. So to me, the most important thing going forward with this commission is the people on it. And right now, I'm quite pleased with the group on it. It's a more diverse group than it's ever been, and that's extremely valuable for all of us.
I applied for the commission and wasn't chosen. And I will say that I was immensely disappointed given the kind of work that I've done in this town with regard to diversity and inclusion. So I, unlike my partner here, have some concerns about the makeup of the Diversity Human Relations Commission. I would have loved to have seen not just one black male on that commission, and maybe I would have hoped that more than one black female had applied to serve on that commission. Certainly, there is room in this town for everybody to have a voice, and to keep me off of that commission, I thought was a humongous injustice, and I thought it was political, and I also thought there was a lot of fear with having a strong black male, not someone who was a house servant, which was the word that someone said I use, which was inappropriate. And I totally disagree. So I think we have to learn to speak our mind, okay? House servant is certainly not the N-word, and I thought it was wrong for the Board of Selectmen. I thought it was, as a matter of fact, a great, great, great injustice for them to keep me off of that commission.
As Nancy said, there is a warrant article pending this spring, sort of related to this this commission. So we need to be mindful of that in terms of how we answer the question. In that, sort of what the commission is charged with is possibly could change in the next couple of months. I think the best way to support the commission is to narrow its focus a little bit. As the commission stands right now, it has a wide purview and doesn't necessarily have the time or the resources to achieve all those goals. So it has responsibilities that range from being the sort of the cable ombudsman commission and overseeing hidden Brookline all the way to issues of inclusion. I think that we need to clearly define what the commission's role is, and I think that the Warren article that's brought to town meeting moves us in the right direction.
All right, let's move back to those school questions. This one says, do you support the school committee's expansion in place plan? And if so, please describe your strategies for bringing the town together to pass the necessary overrides, which are projected to be very high. This time, I think we'll start with Arthur again.
I think in terms of the override and the schools, the initiative or the thrust has to be to bring the community together. I think we've got to come up with a plan how we can have everybody buy into this in terms of all of the children in this town belong to us. It's not a question of whether you have had children go through the school system, whether you presently have children in the school system. My two have been through the system, through the school system, graduated, moved on to college, are gainfully employed, homeowners, et cetera, et cetera. I have accomplished my goal, my life's goal, actually, in terms of doing what I was put on this earth to do, which is to create and support the next generation. I want that to happen for everybody else who comes into this town and puts their children, enrolls their children in that school system. It's got to be everybody in the town of Brookline coming together to support the schools and do it with our pocketbooks. It's a very, very important, I think, initiative, and we have to do it together, not in terms of people being in their separate corners.
Benjamin?
I think it's critically important that we maintain support for the school system. We had a community conversation through the B-Space committee, and that committee supported an expand in place solution. I think that this conversation has been fruitful, and I think that it's been informative. I do think that the B-Space committee came up with the right solution. For right now, I think that we need to move the process forward, be mindful of deadlines, funding deadlines at the state level, and the looming need for the classroom space to come online. I think that where we are today necessitates that we adopt the expand in place solution.
Yeah, well, as far as the expand in place solution, I think parts of it make a lot of sense. I would like to see us be, I don't mean to second guess, I wasn't on the B-Space committee, I don't mean to second guess them, I know they put in a lot of hard work, but I think that we also need to think, in addition to that, of some creative solutions. For instance, some programs that might get some of our kids out of the high school seats and into perhaps some liaison programs we might have with some of the universities. That way, as this bulge of students hits the high school, we might still be able to accommodate people if we're able to move some people around a little bit that way, or consider educational summer programs and give credit for students who they do have summer school now, but it's not very popular. I think there are some programs. For instance, I used to send my son on some language programs in the summer, and even though I could have gotten all the documentation, the high school wouldn't give him credit for those programs. Well, I think we need to really consider all those options now, so that instead of overcrowding our classrooms, if we can get some people to get maybe even better educational experiences without everybody being at the high school at once, that would be a good way to go. In terms of selling an override, I have always found the people of Brookline, even though the many whose kids have grown and are no longer in the schools or who never had kids, to be quite supportive, actually, of our educational system. But I think that what this is going to take is a huge educational effort. We're going to have to really set forth all the information about why this the override is needed, and what the details are, what the makeup are, so people can understand what they're being asked to vote for.
Well, I admit to being a little agnostic on this question. I heard Bob Sperber, Dr. Sperber, come before the B-Space Committee and say, make a bold move. And so I think whatever solution the town goes forward with should be a bold move. We should be able to go to the voters and say, we are doing something bold. I don't like the notion that we're just going to break things up into different parts and say, we'll take a little bit of Metco here, a little bit of materials fee here, we're going to add a student here to the classroom. I think we need to look to our school committee, and we need to look to our superintendent to lay out a vision for why this is not, the best of the worst possible options, but the best way forward for the schools. That's the pressure I would put on. I want to hear that.
Thank you. We have two more really important questions. One touches back on a Brookline problem that has been partially discussed in another question. But first, I'm going to ask a very large question that takes us into a much bigger picture and makes us think in a more forward-looking way. And it goes like this. What disruptive forces do you believe may be at work in our society that would dramatically change how the town of Brookline conducts its business? What do you propose to do in office to prepare to address what might be a seismic change? This is going to take a little thought, but we have to plunge in and do it. Benjamin, start.
First victim. Let me talk a little bit about two sort of seismic changes that I see looming. I think one, there's been a trend in municipal government recently towards data-driven decision-making and having data very available to decision makers and to citizens by which to judge the effectiveness, the operations of municipal government. And I think that's one seismic change looming on the horizon for Brookline. I think that we're going to be pushed as a community, and our elected officials are going to be pushed to provide that data to citizens by which to measure performance. But also, decision makers are going to start to push for availability of the data to help them make decisions. Number two is technology in general. I think that there's increasing demand for technology to be ubiquitous in our schools, in our community, for more and more information to be posted online, and for there to be access to technology for those who may have some socioeconomic concerns. And I think that's going to be something that Brookline has to continue to face. We've started to make strides in that direction with the offering of the Brook Online suite of applications and the use of Facebook and social media, Twitter, by not only the town side, in the school side, but also by police and fire. So those two issues, the use and availability of data and the use and availability of technology.
All right, Nancy.
Okay, I'm a little confused by the question, because I thought it was talking more about terrorism or something rather than what Ben was talking about.
One may interpret the question. You go right ahead and interpret it.
Well, I will just say that we do have very good public safety forces in town. Both our police and fire are excellent and have been very proactive at looking at threats they might see or problems they might see in the area. We have a response time that's 3.3 minutes. That means when you call, from the time they dispatch someone, they get to your house in under 4 minutes, which is a very good record and been highly effective for people, particularly senior citizens, who are concerned about that response time. Not that I'm putting the senior citizens in the disruptive category. I wasn't really sure what was meant by that question, but.
Well, one can interpret that in many ways, and there are certainly serious forces to think about. Go ahead, Brooks.
Well, I'll touch on something I talked about at the beginning. I think we're living through a seismic change right now in terms of the diversity of the town. And I think if you walk the halls of Brookline High School, it looks a lot different than if you go to town meeting, or if you go to a Board of Selectmen's meeting, or if you go to a school committee meeting, or if you go to an advisory committee meeting. So I think there's a seismic change going on with our children. There's a seismic change going on in terms of the population of the town. And I think the challenge is going to be for us to embrace that change and not resist it.
Let me piggyback, if I can, on what Brooks just said, but come at it from a different direction. I said in the beginning that I moved here and moved into 116 Tappan Street. I sold that house about 10 years ago to a Guatemalan couple, and I said to them at the closing, the reason that I'm selling you this house is because I want the Brookline Public Schools to do for your children what it's done for mine. And periodically I would see they had a boy and a girl. The boy was older, and periodically I would see the boy walking down the street, and I would say to him, Victor, how are things going at the high school? And he would say to me, okay, how are you doing with certain classes? And he would tell me, okay. And then I remember I was walking up the street, and I said to him, you ready to graduate? And he said, yes. And I said, what college are you going to? He said, I'm not going to college. And my heart hit the floor. And I said to him, what do you mean you're not going to college? And he said, I'm not going to college. And so I took him by the hand eventually and brought him down to the high school, and I brought him to Dean Mims's office. And I said to Dean Mims, you get this young man in some kind of college. And he got him into Bay State Community College. This was in April, I think it was. And these are the kinds of things that we have to be mindful of in this school system. It's important that the high school is changing, the elementary schools are changing, and we need to be able to educate all of the children.
We have a last question before we come back to letting you finally give us your summary of your candidacy for selectman. Earlier this evening, we had the presentation from the candidate for the Brookline Housing Authority, and you had a question earlier this evening about a particular housing project in Brookline. The final question is on housing and relates to a need that we have for housing in Brookline. The League of Women Voters had a very informative discussion with the head of the Brookline Housing Authority last year at our annual meeting, which indicated a very serious need for affordable housing in Brookline. And the question that's being asked is this: what do you think is the best way to handle housing development in Brookline, given that we have school crowding and we have not met the 10% affordable housing goal? How would you promote affordable housing development? I think I'll start with Brooks this time.
Well, one concern I have is how we run our affordable housing policy. What we have is a housing advisory board, and that housing advisory board oversees a trust fund and makes some decisions and suggestions about how money will be utilized. I would like to see the selectmen play a greater role in trying to think proactively about affordable housing, and instead of being reactive or opportunistic.
Okay, Arthur?
I'm not sure how, but I would like to see if we can find more space somehow in this town to develop affordable housing. I'm not saying that people aren't looking, but I think that we need to do a better job of looking even more seriously so that we can have a more diverse community. So it may mean that we can build more triple deckers, but I think the whole notion that we can only build 1 and 2 family houses, needs to change, and maybe town meeting or town meeting needs to maybe look at the laws and change the laws so that we can increase the level of housing that we build in the town.
I think we've been successful over the past decade in developing affordable housing units in concert with larger development, so integrating affordable housing units into market rate developments, and I think that that's a policy that should continue. I think that the other sort of way to continue to encourage affordable housing and promote it is through the strategic deployment of the Housing Trust Fund, Brookline's Housing Trust Fund, to encourage, to enable affordable housing when it's possible and where it's possible. And I'll close by saying I think we also need to be mindful of preserving the existing affordable housing stock. We're getting to the point where HUD-subsidized mortgages are starting to expire, and you're seeing the transition of existing housing units back to market rate. So we need to be mindful of these expiring use projects and protect our existing stock.
Yes, I must disagree with Brooks on this one. In fact, the selectmen have been very proactive on affordable housing. We have hired staff in the planning department specifically to deal with affordable housing. And the Housing Trust Fund, while we do get recommendations from the Housing Advisory Board, that is the selectmen's decision what to do about that. We took some town land on the top of Fisher Hill and decided to do affordable housing there with some market rate housing to help pay for the project. It was highly successful, a number of affordable units, and people were thrilled to get in there. That was actually our town-owned land that we decided to put to that use. We also, when St. Aidan's, when the Catholic Church was closing St. Aidan's and was considering what to do with that, the town administrator at the time, who's since retired, went to them and said, we would like you to consider affordable housing on this site because it's a high priority of the Board of Selectmen. And the board fully supported that project, including a substantial amount of our housing trust fund money going toward that. In addition, Joanne mentioned the Dummer Street project, which is a housing authority project, and we have been very supportive of that, both financially and morally supportive of that. So I think we have been quite proactive in that area.
Thank you. We've come to the time when it's time to wrap up the presentation of many ideas from the candidates for selectmen. And I will invite Nancy to begin, and we'll go in the same order that we started as you introduced yourselves, to make your closing statements.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, it was a pleasure being here tonight, and I want to thank all of you who put in the time and effort to organize this, and thank those of you who came. As I say, it's a time when we are facing, it seems like because of the effect of Proposition 2.5, where we can only raise the taxes 2.5%, and yet our costs go up more than 2.5% every year, we are constantly in a structural deficit. And yet, I think we are facing the most challenging circumstances I've ever seen right now, with this huge increase in our school-age population, and how do we accommodate them both in terms of buildings and teachers and materials and all that goes with that. And so I think there is going to be a lot of juggling to figure out the answers to these questions. On the other hand, I hear, as a member of the Council on Aging, from seniors who are deeply concerned about their tax burden and wanting to stay in their homes in Brookline. So we're going to have to listen to a lot of these competing interests and decide what to do. And I think that it is quite a challenge. And as I mentioned earlier, I think I offer a lot of experience in dealing with those issues.
Brookline has not had a contested election for selectmen in some time. And I think it's really important, no matter how people vote, that they come out and vote. In 2012, something like 30,000 people came out to vote in the presidential election in November. But in May, something like 4,000 people came out to vote. So part of the reason for that is that there aren't choices. But you all, everybody in the town, has a very real choice come May 6th. There's a couple of issues. We've touched on some of them tonight, but the one I'll focus on right now is Metco. We've had Metco since the late 60s, and Metco's never been on the chopping block the way it is right now. And I don't believe it is we can cut a little bit here, cut a little bit there program. When you have children, our Brookline children, saying, if not for Metco, I'd be the only black child in the class, we really need to listen to that child. So I think we've got a choice, and really it's going to be in your hands where you land.
I want to thank everyone for coming out this evening, and I also want to thank the sponsoring organizations for organizing this, putting in the time, sending me email after email, badgering me about, making sure that I get here on time. Sean? The town of Brookline advertises itself almost globally as a liberal, progressive community. But as Brooks and I have repeatedly pointed out, having 25 department heads draws a great deal of suspicion to that claim. And as I have pointed out many times over the past years, America elected its first black president twice, Barack Obama. Massachusetts, 8 years ago, elected its first black governor. Cambridge has had 2 black mayors over the past decade. Boston elected black, Hispanic, and Asian councilors, giving them a total of 4 city councilors in the Black, Latino, and Asian category. Newton elected twice its first black mayor, Seti Warren. And the town of Brookline? Where do blacks, Asian, and Hispanics fit anywhere in the power structure? There is not one black and/or Latino elected official representing this community. And there is only one Asian on the school committee. Our present all-white Board of Selectmen shelled out a $1,000 honorarium for a Martin Luther King Day celebration speaker this past January, which is nothing short of disingenuous and insulting. Martin Luther King didn't give up his life for people to make money off of his assassination. And I think that it would take a black or Latino Board of Selectmen to be on that Selectmen's committee to make sure that something like that never happens again. The Board of Selectmen should be committed to serving all of the citizens of this community, regardless of race. Everyone should have a chance to grab the brass ring, not just white people. I spoke with a multiracial group of students at the SWS program at Brookline High School Monday afternoon just passed, and it was very interesting and encouraging what they had to say about their dissatisfaction that Dr. Mims was not hired as the headmaster of Brookline High School last year. We need to come up with a different way of looking at our society and how people are going to share power in this town. Please vote for Ames and Conquest on the 6th of May. Thank you.
I again want to thank the League of Women Voters, the Brookline Neighborhood Alliance, and the Town Meeting Members Association for organizing tonight's event and giving us all an opportunity to share our views on the issues. I also want to thank everybody who came out tonight, both in person and who's watching on television, and a special thank you to all of you who submitted questions, such interesting questions at that. This is a very important election, and one that has the potential to shape the course of Brookline far into the future. The large increase in school population over the past few years has put pressure on the town's infrastructure and on our financial resources. Addressing the physical and financial needs of the schools that stem from this enrollment increase, I think are the single largest issue facing the town right now. But they're not the only issue. Making sure that Brookline's roads and sidewalks remain passable and in good condition, that our parks and open space remain well cared for, and that Brookline's public safety, police and fire safety response remains rapid. And add to that, that we maintain our support for our senior citizens through services. I'm running for selectman because I love Brookline. I grew up here, I went to the Brookline Public Schools, and I want to make sure it remains a highly desirable place to live and to raise a family. I believe I'm the best qualified candidate for selectmen to join the Board of Selectmen and to make sure that Brookline remains a special place. For the past 5 years, I've been on the advisory committee, chaired a subcommittee for the past 3 years of that larger finance committee, and that coupled with my knowledge and experience at the state level, I think makes me an ideal choice to join the board. I encourage anybody who's got additional questions about issues that we talked about tonight or that we didn't address to email me, ben@benfranco.org, or feel free to visit, my campaign website, www.benfranco.org. For more information about me and my candidacy. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. I remind you that Election Day is May 6th, and I ask for your vote for Selectman. Ben Franco for Selectman. Thank you.
Thank you to our candidates for your answers, your thoughtful answers to all of our questions, and thank you especially for being candidates and making this a real choice of votes. Thank you. We need to quickly change. Yes, we can give them a hand. They surely do deserve a hand for all of that. Quickly, could we have the school committee candidates come forward to the front table? I can't do this with the right. No, I broke it. The chief closed the door on me as I was getting out. I have mobility issues and I'm very slow.
Sir, nice to see you. Yes, nice to meet you. Now I have a name and face. Oh, great. You got me. They're all on my deaf ear. Oh, thanks.
It will depend to some extent on how many questions.
Sean?
You said 2 minutes. You didn't say 2-minute opening.
I've never been a politician that cannot feel any time. It's usually the other problem. It's usually more common.
There's a stranger sitting here. I'm scared.
All righty. If we could please have the audience at attention, please. We're ready to begin with the candidates for the school committee. Could we please ask the audience to be seated? Thank you. We have this evening 3 candidates to present for 3 seats on the school committee. And our speakers this evening are Rebecca Stone, Michael Glover, and Lisa Jackson. We will, as they introduce themselves, we'll start in that order, and as before, we'll skip around. We have before I ask them to introduce themselves, I'll remind the audience and the candidates that the questions that we have for you reflect some others that we've heard about tonight. There are certainly issues here of concern about continuing the Metco program and supporting it, about the costs of educating, about disparities that might exist in some of our practices within the schools, and even more. There certainly are issues of diversity. We heard a lot about diversity tonight. And there's some more of those issues represented here. So we will have a few questions for you to answer, not quite as many. We can't go as long as we did with the selectmen. But we'll start by having Barbara Stone introduce herself, and we'll work across the table. And then I'll begin with a question.
Thank you and good evening, and thanks to the League, the BNA and TMMA for hosting this candidate forum. Sorry, I'm very sorry. I wanted to thank everybody for hosting this forum and to all of you for coming. I'm Rebecca Stone. I'm running for re-election to the school committee for a 4th term. And I want to talk tonight very briefly in opening about the things we don't talk about that much these days, when that is the school system's accomplishments that help explain Brookline's extraordinary attraction to the families who come to us in droves these days. Since I joined the school committee in 2005, we carried out a comprehensive strategic plan for the school district, the first one we've done, a plan that still actively guides our program, our budgeting, and our assessment of progress. It also added a core value of the schools, and that is educational equity. To me, that core value is reflected in our having achieved a true school system where every elementary school guarantees a Brookline education rather than the mix of approaches, curricula, and performance that characterized the system when I began on the committee 9 years ago. I'm proud of our first ever schools facility master plan, a process that in 2008 anticipated the challenges of physical plant and enrollment growth that we are experiencing today. And that plan led us to set an agenda for an aggressive process with the School Building Authority in Massachusetts to underwrite school expansions and renovations that we accomplished at the Runkle School and the Heath School, and we are well underway in renovating and expanding the Devotion School. Despite those essential efforts, enrollment growth continued, as you all know, to outstrip our facility growth, which required a conversation with the community about whether a new school should be created to absorb the growth. As a result, the school committee joined with the selectmen to create the B-Space Committee, on which I served. I'm proud of all of that work, but I'm also very worried about the fracturing of the community over the school problems. We have never faced this perfect storm of challenges. We've faced significant budget deficits in the past, and we have survived them. We've faced school facility challenges and overcome those. But we have never faced multiple facility expansion needs simultaneous with significant operating deficit. That's what we face now. That's what we need to do to continue delivering high quality, and I look forward to being a part of the school committee effort to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank the Brookline Neighborhood Alliance, the League of Women Voters, and the Town Meeting Members Association for organizing this event and giving me and the rest of the candidates a chance to speak tonight. My name is Michael Glover. I live in Precinct 5, and I moved to Brookline about a year and a half ago from Jamaica Plains. So I'm in some ways part of the problem in terms of what we face here is in enrollment pressures on the schools, but I'm hoping to be part of the solution as well. I have 2 daughters, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old who presumably will attend the Lincoln School. And I'm running for school committee because I want to ensure that as we deal with our enrollment growth, we also retain the culture and characteristics within our schools that attracted my family to Brookline and undoubtedly has attracted many others. I believe that we can address our need for additional classroom space in a responsible manner while continuing to participate in the Metco program, preserving the materials fee program for teachers, and addressing the concerns of parents at schools that are likely to be impacted by school building projects. And I believe that we can do so without compromising the quality of education that we provide. As a member of the Override Study Committee, I'm very concerned about some of the proposals that are being discussed, and as a result, felt that I had to take this opportunity to participate in the decision-making process that I think we all can agree will have significant impacts on Brookline for years to come. I'm a real estate attorney by training, and I currently work for the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. Prior to working for the state, I worked at a few different law firms here in the Boston area. There's not an attorney currently on the school committee at the moment, and I believe that my skills will be helpful in dealing with the inevitable legal issues that arise relative to the schools. In all, I'm extremely committed to public service, as I think is evidenced through my professional work, my service on the Override Study Committee, and I'm very much looking forward to continuing that in serving on the school committee. Thank you.
Lisa. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Jackson. I'm a parent of 2 Pierce students, a 7th grader and a 3rd grader, and we moved to Brookline, like Michael, for the schools and for the community. When I came from California many years ago, everybody said to me the best place to live in the Boston area is Brookline.
And so I started in Brookline, moved to Jamaica Plain, and then came back and have been here ever since. I am very excited to participate on the school committee for a variety of reasons. One, clearly my children are in the schools and I'm very interested in their experience, but also in the experiences of all children who attend the schools, not just now, but in the future. I see the role of the school committee fundamentally as being a steward of that system for children to come, not just ours right now. I have national education experience. I have served on many boards of education organizations. I currently am a philanthropist working with an organization that raises money for education organizations and spend a lot of time looking at what districts and schools are doing across the country. And I hope to bring that type of knowledge to bear on Brookline and the issues that we're facing. One of the things that excites me most about participating on this school committee will be the chance to see not just how we can ensure that Brookline stays the strong school system that it is today, but how it becomes even better. And I'm quite excited by a lot of the opportunities I see for us to grow our strengths around technology and science and math, and how we really start to improve some of the things we do in curriculum and instruction for all of our students across the district. Thank you.
All right. It turns out that the largest number of questions have to do with Metco, which is interesting, and we have a variety of other questions, but I'm going to start with the Metco question, and I'm going to give you two versions of it, which go like this. Number one, can I count on you to work and vote for the continuance of a robust and large Metco program? And the second question is, it seems like Boston Public Schools are steadily improving. Is Metco still necessary? We'll start with Rebecca and work across on this first question.
The answer to the first part is very easy, yes. The entire school committee actually currently, and I believe into the future, will be extraordinarily strong supporters of the Metco program. We were a founding district for Metco. We are, I think, the second largest Metco district in the Commonwealth, and it has brought extraordinary benefits both to, I hope, to the students who come here from Boston, but also very much to our own students and the communities in which the Metco students live and, not live, but are educated in all of our schools. Those benefits were beautifully articulated at the Override Study Committee hearing on Metco. I think I couldn't even begin to approach recapping everything that we heard from students, from parents, from teachers about the importance of diversity, what it brings, what cultural diversity brings, what differences of opinion bring to our schools, to our students, and how important the richness of that experience is to the overall quality of the public schools. So yes, I'm a very strong supporter of the Metco program and have said so for countless years now with our legislative delegation as well, when it's always a big topic for us when we talk to our legislators every year about what their priorities are in protecting it. I would not pretend to know enough about what's happening in Boston to know whether or not the Boston families and public schools feel that Metco is necessary. As long as Metco exists and wants to be a part of our lives, I would like it to be a part of our lives in Brookline.
Similarly, the answer to the first question is yes. I'm a wholehearted supporter of our continued participation in the Metco program. And from my perspective, it's not necessarily just a question of does Boston still need it, it's a question of whether Brookline needs it. And I think that one thing that gets lost in the conversation is that the presence of students of color within the classroom is not just beneficial to them, but is really hugely beneficial to the white students within the classroom. I don't believe that we're just building, humans to fill them with information. I mean, I think we're building them more holistically, and I think we can't build holistic students or have holistic students graduate from our schools if they're not interacting and having really robust and meaningful experiences with persons of color. Race relations are a huge issue in our society, And I think it's absolutely imperative that, particularly in formative years, that our students be exposed to people from a lot of different backgrounds, both economically, socially, and racially.
So we're going to sound a little repetitive up here, but yes, you can count on me to support Metco fully and robustly, I think was the language that was used, and to not support any choices to limit or reduce the numbers of Metco students in our schools. I would agree with what Michael said in terms of it isn't really just a conversation about whether Boston needs it. It is a conversation about what Brookline wants and needs for its children. If we want to be and continue to be one of the better school districts in this country, our students need exposure to all kinds of people and cultures and experiences and languages. And while we can send them all over the world for that, we can also do it right here at home. And I feel very strongly that that's an integral part of an education that then generates students who can be successful in any number of arenas. So I think while you could look at Boston's performance and question whether or not they need it, though I would argue Boston would argue they still probably do, I think we need it even more so for those reasons.
Right. The next question comes to us also from multiple questioners, and it's a big one in town right now. We've heard a lot about it in recent weeks and months. So we'll take it in this form, and in this one I'll start with Michael for the answer. The question, do you feel the build-in-place B-space recommendation should continue to be pursued as the solution to our space challenges? Why? If not, what do you propose?
I do think that we should continue to pursue the expand-in-place proposal that's been adopted by the school committee. I think it is. I think there are a lot of details that still remain to be fleshed out, and I think feasibility studies and further review of what the expansion options are really likely to look like will give us a lot more information as to whether it is something that is going to adequately address our needs while also addressing the concerns of parents at the affected schools. At the same time, it's not outrageous for us to continue to think about other options in the event that it becomes politically unviable or economically unviable or equitably unviable to go down the road that we were going with the expand in place. So I think we do need to maintain a certain amount of flexibility, but in general, I do support the expand in place option.
And we'll go with Lisa.
Okay. I support the expand in place options that are on the table right now, and I think as short-term solutions to our problem, they're reasonable. I think we do, as Michael pointed out, the devil's always in the details, and I think we may need to remain very flexible in terms of how we all as a larger community step up around this issue, because we can't make the choice not to serve students, so we are going to have to make a choice. And then I'm most interested in how, once we make that choice, how we make it the best choice. So whether we're expanding buildings or moving students to Old Lincoln School, how do we make that the best experience for those students? The only other thing I would say is that I, too, am interested in keeping an open door to conversations for longer-term solutions, because Brookline is not going to suddenly become a non-desirable community for people to move into. So we're going to continue to have to address this question, and I would be very interested in continuing to consider other options that are out there regarding space.
And Rebecca.
Thank you. Just to be very clear, the B-space recommendation for expand in place was actually pretty broad. And what we're actually dealing with right now is the recommendation by the school committee to expand by 4 classrooms at the Lawrence School, to expand the Driscoll School by as many as I think it's 8 more classrooms on top of, or 9 more classrooms on top of 3 that we would capture. I may have those numbers wrong, I apologize. And eventually to expand the Pierce School to complete the expansion that would be necessary for the numbers that we know are coming. We also need to look at expanding the high school, and there's currently a study study being done by the superintendent and the headmaster in concert with a consultant that's been hired to look at what our opportunities might be for expanding the high school, where we are going to have a lot more students by 2022, 2,500 at least, and that's not including what might happen at Hancock Village. So yes, I support the expand in place because it is what we are already doing. We've done it at Runkle, we've done it at Heath, we are doing it at Devotion, and the next phases in that, especially the Driscoll renovation and moving those 4 classrooms into the Lawrence School, however they get done. If stick construction, I think, is our current plan, is very, very important to be able to serve our students.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question that is related to all that discussion that has gone into the B-Space proposals. This is a short question, but interesting to me especially. How accurate are future enrollment projections? I've heard that they are questionable, the questioner asks. I would like to add personally here and take privilege as the moderator to say I think they're terribly questionable. I've lived here 20-some years and seen a lot of changes in Brookline. I'll give you my opinion. I think that they're way too low. Brookline is full of very young children these days. But the questioner asks, how accurate are future enrollment projections? I've heard they are questionable. And this time we'll just go backwards from Lisa.
Well, I'm not in a position to say how accurate or inaccurate they are. Unfortunately, I'm not that familiar with how they've been calculated, so I don't want to feign that expertise. I will say that the growth in Brookline has been 35%, as I understand it, since 2006, and I don't imagine that while it will at some point maybe start to level off, as Rebecca just pointed out, the growth in the high schools, the young children who are here who will grow up, and like many people in Brookline, raise their children here, the numbers aren't going to slow down. So I think I'm a little less interested in whether or not the numbers are accurate, and I'm a little more interested in what is it we want for all the children who are in this town, and how do we make it great, whatever the number might be. So, but I'll leave it at that.
I think that the projections for the numbers were somewhat conservative. I believe they were somewhere in the order of 550 per class, rather than some of the actual enrollments that we're seeing. Although Rebecca could probably correct me if I'm misstating that. So it's possible they could be on the low end. I don't think they're on the high end. And I think, and to a large degree, the students are already here. We're going to see the high school enrollment. We have a pretty good idea based on cohort retention rates and other things what our high school is going to look like. And there's not really, I don't see any indication that we're going to see significant reductions in those numbers. So whether they're too high, I don't think so. Whether they're too low, maybe another issue. And again, as Rebecca indicated, we're not even factoring in what may happen with Hancock Village.
Enrollment projections, it's an inexact science, as any of the demographers who have looked at this will tell you. The Override Study Committee is repeating an exercise that we went through with the MGT consultants with the facilities master plan, and they are looking at different ways of projecting enrollment growth and numbers, but I believe in the long run we will still have uncertainty. What we do know is that the projections that we had out of the MGT report in 2008 were too low, and again in 2011 they redid it and estimated it up, and they were again too low for what we've been experiencing. We had a lot of people saying in the beginning, when the school committee started saying we have an enrollment problem, and there was a lot of pushback saying, look, we've had enrollment growth before, it's always cyclical, it's a bubble, it'll go down, and it hasn't. And that's what's different this time, is that it has not gone down. It has gone up and up and up and up, and we've had 3 different cohorts of increases, so that our average class size, average grade size right now coming into the kindergartens is between 600 and 650, whereas it used to be between 400 and 450. So you can do the math on that. We know they're still coming, and we know that having projected 630 kindergartners for next fall, the trend so far in terms of enrollments is higher than that. So all of our projections, even for what we thought we were planning for, may be too low. So are they perfect? No. Are they too low? I think probably a little bit. When will they level off? No one knows.
I do always wonder if they've ever gone around and truly counted the population at all the many, many preschool programs that are around town, the nursery schools and daycares and so on. We're going to ask one more question before we ask the candidates to give us their concluding statements. And we're sorry that we can't have them answer all of the questions from the audience, but this one is certainly an important one. How will you address perceived inequities between the schools, class sizes, numbers of technology devices per student, quality of the physical plants, et cetera? We'll start with Michael on this one.
Sure. It is one of the principles of the school committee and the Brookline Public Schools is to create as equitable a classroom experience for all students as possible. I think there have been varying degrees of success in doing that over time. But I think it's something that the school committee has incrementally tried to increase or eliminate the inequities, that is. And I think it's something that we should continue to try to do on an incremental basis. I think it's probably not possible to satisfy or eliminate all of the inequities all at once, but we have to continue to work hard in doing that.
Lisa, we'll take you next.
Great. So one of the first things I learned about as I started in this process were some of the inequities that students were experiencing across the district. My son has attended 2 schools in Brookline, and Heath being one and Pierce being the other, and access to resources are vastly different in both of those schools. The first thing that I would do is really try to understand where the inequities exist and get what I would say is needed, which is more rigorous data about where they exist, the definitions of when we say things are not acceptable in the way of classrooms. What's the definition of a usable classroom? What's the definition of a classroom we'd want our students to be in? And can we then measure to see how inequitable those might be across the district? And then try to understand why. I'm a firm believer that as a public school system, we need to have a high bar across the district for all of our students. And then certainly schools can innovate and create on top of that. But my concern would be if the inequity is happening at such a level that we're actually lowering the standards for students in some schools as a result, that we figure out how to address that so that where there is opportunity for creativity and innovation, we can have it, but where we're certain that all students are receiving high quality experiences across the schools. But I would start with data and information, and I would also visit each of the schools for confirmation.
Thank you. And Rebecca.
Equity across the schools actually drives a lot of our conversation at the school committee in terms of responding to the challenges and the programming and in budgeting more than anything else. It is not just a core value, it is embedded in all of what we do in terms of looking at what we provide in Brookline and the inequities. As I said in my opening comments, some of the inequities that were in place in Brookline 10 years ago are really not there anymore because of very specific actions that we've taken, looking at curriculum, looking at staffing, looking at the way programs are rolled out across the town, making sure that there are schools. One of the things that this town voted for in 2008 was a K-6 world language program that was based on the equity of providing that language, the same language program to all 8 of our elementary schools. I think equity is across the schools is embedded in this town's embrace of the K-8 neighborhood model, where each neighborhood expresses its own particular culture in that school, but that school is still a Brookline elementary school, and you can be confident coming into Brookline that your child at any of the schools will get an education that has the same high standards, that has the same curriculum, where the teachers are being held to the same high standards for every child in that school. So I agree with what both Mike and Lisa said, that these are things you take one at a time, but this is a lens, the equity is a lens through which we look all the time for the public schools of Brookline. It is an essential one, and actually one of the proudest parts of being part of the strategic plan all those years ago was that we raised it up as a core value, and we've really been trying to practice that and will continue to.
Thank you. We certainly have lots of community interest in developments with the schools and the school committee this year. As we turn to the concluding comments, we'll start with Lisa. This is your final say here.
First, I would just like to thank you all for coming and for having us here tonight. And I'd like to thank the Brookline Neighborhood Alliance, the League of Women Voters of Brookline, and Town Meeting Members Association. It's been an exciting experience for me to get to know the town of Brookline more intimately through this process, including each of these organizations. I am excited to be a part of this moment in time for Brookline, not just because we have challenges, but because we have real opportunities. And I'm excited to see what we can envision for the future for our students when it comes to what kinds of experiences they have in K-8, what kinds of experiences they have in preschool and in high school. I'm committed to maintaining the Metco program, the materials fee program, and all of those things that make Brookline what it is. I don't think we should start to chip away at everything we value and care about in order to save money. I think we need to be more creative and more thoughtful about how we do that, and I think we can find a way. We're a smart town. We have a lot of smart people. I know we can do it if we put our minds to it, and if we as a community, not just as the school committee and the selectmen and the Driscoll parents and the Heath parents, but as a community, we all come together around schools that make a difference for our experience living in this town. Schools throw off value for everybody who lives here, not just for those who have children in the schools. And I look forward to having a community conversation about how Brookline maintains the high-quality schools that we have.
Michael.
Again, as Lisa did, I would also like to start by thanking the Brookline Neighborhood Alliance, the League of Women Voters, and the Town Meeting Members Association for having us here tonight, and thank you to all of you for attending. Like Lisa, I'm also very optimistic about the road ahead. There are a lot of challenges. It's not going to be easy. There are going to be a lot of heated discussions, but I think given the values of this town, and the thoughtfulness of the people who live here, I believe that we're going to craft excellent solutions that really serve all of our students and all of our families. And I'm extremely excited about being a part of that process and serving all of you, and quite frankly, listening to all of you as part of the process. I believe one thing that we really need to do is get as much input as possible from as many sources as possible, and that's the only way that we're really going to develop the proper way to address all of the issues that we have. To go back to my original remarks, again, I am a strong supporter of Metco. We didn't talk too much about materials fee here tonight. I think materials fee is an incredibly important part of the recruitment and retention efforts of the school with respect to our teachers. And teachers are a fundamental part of what make our schools a great learning environment. So I think it's absolutely imperative that we retain the materials fee program for teachers. Again, I'm extremely excited, very much committed to working with all of you, and very much looking forward to the opportunity to serve. Thank you.
Rebecca.
I want to add my thanks to the sponsors of this evening, and thank you all for coming, and invite you all to come to school committee meetings. It would be lovely to have a crowd like this, and public comment and questions as well, as we grapple with all these issues. I also want to say how thrilled I am actually at the quality of my running mates. We are on a de facto slate, I guess, at this point, running unopposed, but it was really a thrill when both Lisa and Michael stepped forward to say they wanted to run for the school committee. I'm thrilled that they'll be serving along with us. We have really, really big challenges. There is no way to sugarcoat what we are facing in the schools, and I think that's compounded by what I said at the beginning about the fracturing of the community as people take aboard what it's going to take to get through this, and understandably are afraid of some of the changes that they suspect might be coming, and are afraid of losing valued resources in the schools, either for their community or for their children or for their future family members. And this is a tall order to get through this period. I am very confident that we will get through it, but we will not get to the other side of the crisis without pain and without a lot of compromise. And like Michael and Lisa, I look forward to the whole community being involved in that. The purpose of B-Space was to get the community involved in the conversation. I think we accomplished that. And very, very grateful to this town, continuing to be grateful to this town and its extraordinary resources, especially the efforts of the Override Study Committee to dig into some of these problems in greater detail, provide the school committee and the selectmen with the information that they're finding to help lead us to the other side of this crisis with a really robust, extremely high-quality school system that I hope you will all continue to support. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our candidates. Before the candidates leave the platform, we're going to turn the program back over to the Brookline Neighborhood Alliance.
Thank you, Margaret. It's getting late, and I just have a few final words of thanks. Thanks, of course, to Margaret Bush for moderating so brilliantly this evening. Thanks also to the town for letting us use this room for this event. And thanks to BIG, the Brookline Interactive Group, formerly known as BATV, which is televising this event, and I expect will be posting it on their website if you'd like to watch some or all of it again. Thanks also to the candidates for participating. One candidate earlier grumbled about getting too many emails from me reminding him of this event. But when you try to organize something like this, your worst nightmare is that some or all of the candidates will forget and not show up. And so I'm very glad that so many of them were able to make it. And last but not least, thanks to all of you for coming this evening and for your fascinating questions, even the one about the bees. Thank you.